Instead of like you having to actually, run a very long and extensive process and finding people that are not even a fit, Juicebox ensures that you have a good top of funnel of people that are actually a good fit. We make sure that you're engaging the right people.
Welcome to InProd, conversations with founders and operators who are building the next wave of AI companies. We go deep on product execution, go-to-market, and the messy middle of building a business. If you're an aspiring founder, operator, or just startup curious, this is your inside look at how companies actually get built.
Before we get to the episode, Laura and I are excited to announce a partnership with Overlap. Fresh out of Y Combinator's summer batch, Overlap is an AI-driven app that uses large language models to curate the best moments from podcast episodes. Imagine having a smart assistant who reads through every podcast transcript, finds the best parts or parts most relevant to your search, and strings them together to form a new, curated stream of content. That is what Overlap does. I personally use Overlap to explore content on future podcast guests and highly recommend it as another diligence tool for investors. Check out Overlap on the App Store today.
Today, we're joined by Ishan Gupta, co-founder of Juicebox. Juicebox is an AI-powered recruiting platform that recently raised its $30 million Series A led by Sequoia. Welcome, Ishan.
Very glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
So let's go back to the early days. When did you first become interested in tech, and how did that shape your high school experience?
I first became interested in tech around middle school, I would say. The first thing I got into was competitive programming. So I found this concept pretty interesting, that there's people who compete on writing code and solving problems more quickly. And I always enjoyed solving problems. I was always into math, computer science in school as well. So it's like I first got into competitive coding. So that was a lot of my middle school and some of my high school. And then at some point, I really got interested in building applications. So it's like maybe I should try building web applications, mobile applications. And I used to game a ton as well on my phone. So I was like, what if I can build more mobile games and more mobile applications? Started doing that around the beginning of high school. And at some point, I was like, okay, what if I can, I just want to see if I can make some money out of it. So I was like, oh, I'll start a freelancing thing and let's see if I can do this for other people. And that actually worked out very well. So I managed to scale a pretty good freelancing business of just finding these clients online, going to them, talking to them, asking them if they need a website built or an application built, and then just doing it for them. And this was all around COVID. So like school was remote. So then I was like, okay, I don't really have to go to school anymore. So what do I do at home? So I just started doing the whole freelancing thing. That's initially how I got into tech.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense given what you're building today.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, is that initially how you and your co-founder met?
That's also actually a very interesting story. So I grew up in India in this town called Kanpur, and my co-founder was studying at Harvard at the time here in the US. This is during COVID. He organized a competition called the Crown Education Challenge. I came across this thing online, and I kind of knew at the time that I want to go to the US. So I was looking into competitions and different things people do here. And I came across this thing where you have to submit a research abstract, like some sort of a technical solution to something pandemic related. The thing that stood out to me is that the prize was you get to meet Stephen Wolfram, who is a very popular computer scientist. He's the founder of Wolfram Alpha. And I was like, oh, I want to meet this guy. He's pretty amazing. So I took part in the competition. I ended up winning. So I met Wolfram. But the more fun thing that came out of it is I met David, who was one of the organizers of this competition. David and I started talking, and we realized that both of us share a lot of interests. He was working on the growth team at Snapchat at the time, and he had also kind of realized that he doesn't really want to work at a very big company and he wants to do something of his own. And I really enjoy building things. So we got in touch, we started working on a bunch of projects together. And then eventually at some point when we had the confidence that we really worked well together, we decided to build a company.
Very cool story. Maybe before we dive into what you guys are building, tell us a little bit about the name. Juicebox is obviously a fun name that you can remember, but I'm curious, is there some other backstory behind it?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. The first thing my co-founder and I built together was a music app. And Juicebox was a wordplay on jukebox. Yeah. And it was like this TikTok meets Spotify experience where you can discover music and it learns from your taste and you find more music that you or artists that you tend to like based on your existing taste. That's what we started off with, and it was called Juicebox. Then we had a long pivoting journey when we actually started the company. And at some point, we were about to launch our recruiting product. And we're like, okay, no one's going to pay attention. It doesn't matter what we call it. Let's just stick with Juicebox. We have the domain anyways. Let's just do that. So we called it Juicebox. And then, I don't know why, but we got a lot of message fit instantly and a lot of traction. And then people started recognizing the name Juicebox, which is why we ended up sticking with it. At this point, I think it's people enjoy like the fun aspect of it. I think a lot of HR and recruiting is extremely boring and like very corporate coded. So I think people enjoy the fact that there's something more fun about us. So,
Yeah, well, it's definitely a playful name, which I think is really cool in like such a, like you said, HR kind of talent recruiting space. You mentioned obviously you and David meet through this competition. You decide, hey, we want to build something, but it sounds like you pivoted a bit. Maybe talk us through kind of that pivot story, and also curious where YC plays in this journey as well.
So YC was incredibly helpful in the first part of our journey because we started off with consumer, like we were doing the music app, right? And that's what most young founders, I think, start off with, especially anyone who like drops out of school, because that's the first thing you interact with, right? Like you use a lot of consumer applications and then you're like, oh, I can do this better. So I'll build a consumer app. That's what we started with. YC was very helpful for us to realize that there's this whole world of business software where it's not just about distribution and doing things at scale. It's about really deep diving into someone's problem and building a novel solution for it. So I think that is what YC was incredibly helpful for us with. The first thing we started off in YC was actually a recruiting marketplace because as I talked about, I freelanced a lot in high school and my co-founder David also did a lot of jobs with different companies, jobs while he was in college. We ended up realizing that we really had to go out of our way to find these jobs. Like it's not like it was very readily available. So our initial intuition was that we should build a freelancing marketplace that helps connect people for these roles more easily. We started off with that during YC and then quickly ended up realizing that there are a lot of marketplaces that do roughly the same thing. So there was no real way for us to build a 10x better product, which is why we ended up pivoting. But the good thing that came out of us building the marketplace is that we really understood the recruiter persona. We worked with a lot of talent teams and we quickly realized the main problem or like the most high value function in recruiting is finding the right people and engaging them, getting them into your process. And we realized that the recruiters are spending a lot of time on this, which is why we ended up realizing that that's what we should be building a solution to. This is around the time ChatGPT also came out and LLMs really started taking off and GPT 3.5 and then 4 and things started getting better. And we realized that these LLMs can help with a lot of this top of funnel process in recruiting, which got us to the product that we are at today.
And I think that's a good transition into sharing what the product is today. What does it look like and how are folks using it, just to ground the audience?
Yeah. Juicebox is an AI recruiting platform that helps companies find and engage talent using LLMs. So what the traditional recruiting flow looks like is you align with some requirements with your hiring manager. You go into a traditional platform, you will put in a bunch of filters, you will start looking at profiles, and then you assess them one by one, you shortlist the people you like, and then you send them an email. And that process takes hours because you have to look at every single profile one by one. And it's an extremely time-taking process. With Juicebox, we try to automate that using LLMs. So instead of you having to do the whole searching process and going through profiles one by one, you describe in natural language who you're looking for, and then we surface the best candidates for you because LLMs are able to evaluate those profiles and surface the best ones for you. Beyond that, we build recruiting agents that take even more control over that process. So instead of you even having to run that search, you kind of just calibrate an agent like a recruiter. They would go back and forth with you. The agent would try to understand your requirements. And once it's like fully calibrated, you can just let it run the process, reach out to people on your behalf, and try to get them into your recruiting funnel.
It's very exciting. How large is your database today and where does it span to in terms of an industry, a geographic standpoint?
We have over 800 million profiles. We collect a lot of like professional data across the web from a lot of different sources. So it spans a ton of different geographies. Pretty much every single person who has a professional presence on the internet, we likely have them in our database.
And are you finding, you mentioned the flow that a recruiter, one of your customers, would take to utilize Juicebox, but as you guys were kind of building the company in the early days, could you talk us through maybe an aha moment, a feature that you launched where people immediately, you realize, hey, we maybe have PMF here? Yeah, just curious how you experimented.
The feature that people really liked was this feature we have called Autopilot, and any recruiter who uses Juicebox is like always raving about it because they really enjoy using that piece. And the Autopilot feature we have is that was the first thing we launched where instead of like actually having to like just summarize profiles or review them, you actually are able to stack rank them based on different criteria. So when a hiring manager specifies their criteria or a recruiter does a search, it's a lot more complicated than it would seem to someone who doesn't work in talent, because there are like must-haves, there are nice-to-haves, there are like bonus points you would maybe like in some profiles, and sometimes it's even a process to like find these requirements. The thing that the Autopilot does very well is it uses LLMs to like semantically look at every single one of these profiles. So you're not just going off of keywords anymore. It's not like I want to find people at Google, It's more semantic than that you can type in more nuanced searches. That is not possible. So I think that is the feature that really stood out to a lot of recruiters and they really enjoy. And the PMF point for us when we like kind of realized that we had PMF was when I remember there was like a month where we had to focus a lot of our energy on fundraising and some like product related things that were not working. And at the time, I think David, my co-founder, was pretty much our only seller. And revenue growth was still pretty strong, even though we didn't put a lot of effort into sales. So we started realizing that it's organically sitting well with people, and all of our growth is coming from word of mouth. It's literally people telling each other about it. So I think that was the moment we realized that, okay, we actually have something pretty good here.
It's impressive because I think a lot of the best companies we work with benefit a lot from, like you said, word of mouth, that viral loop that happened. And HR and recruiting professionals in particular, at least my understanding is they're a close-knit community. So
Yeah.
it's great that you're already starting to see them talking about the platform. Maybe just one more question on that. From a customer perspective, who are the types of folks that utilize Juicebox? Is there a particular type of customer that you're like, hey, if you're listening to this now, you should be using Juicebox today?
Yeah. Every company hires, and we have customers all across the board. We have Fortune 500 companies where their entire talent teams rely on Juicebox for sourcing. We have a lot of like high growth companies like Ramp is a customer of ours, Workada, Scale AI, a lot of these customers, high growth tech teams that really need to find top talent. They utilize Juicebox to do that. We have over 3,000 customers. So anyone who feels like recruiting is a need for them, they should absolutely be using Juicebox. Because we are product-led growth, there's also a very strong self-serve motion, which is why we don't really need to spend that much effort on outbound. In fact, we almost do very little outbound, which is why a lot of our growth is pretty much inbound. So that's literally customers telling each other about it. And as you mentioned, these communities are very close-knit. So recruiters like to talk about their stack. They like to share it with other recruiters, which has worked very well for us.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Laura and I are thrilled to announce a partnership with Grata, an intuitive deal sourcing and diligence platform. Keep missing out on private market deals? Ditch the Rolodex and get Grata. Grata's AI-powered platform provides accurate data, deep insights, and time-saving workflows that help get more deals done. And it's trusted by over 500 firms and 3,000 deal makers, including myself. I've personally used Grata in both my deal sourcing and diligence workflows and would recommend their tool to any investor across private equity, growth equity, corp dev, or investment banking. We've negotiated a special offer for our audience. Mention PartnerPath to the Grata team during sign-up, and you'll get free executive seats for your partners and MDs included in your subscription. Now, back to the episode.
How do you encourage stickiness within your customer base? Because I'm sure you're working with larger Fortune 500 customers where it's like, okay, we always have an open engineer role or an open marketing role. And so it makes sense where if it's working, you're not going to replace what's working. But maybe for smaller companies where the hiring is a bit more sporadic, how do you ensure that folks are coming back to Juicebox? Because I'm not sure if all 3,000 are paying, but I'm sure that you're trying to upsell and encourage as many as possible too.
Yeah. All 3,000 of them are paying customers,
Okay.
thankfully.
Let the record show.
Yeah.
No free lunch around here.
Yeah, to clarify. No, I think there's two elements to like the stickiness piece that you're talking about. Even though, yeah, for the Fortune 500s, they have so much attrition that they need thousands of roles filled every year. So it's a whole different scale of problem. For a lot of the smaller companies, it is a lot more cyclical. You're hiring more sometime, you're hiring less another time. There's two things that make the product incredibly sticky, even in those cases. One is the data. So you have all of this data within Juicebox about who you've engaged in the past, who responded, who's interested, who's not interested. And all of that data is very valuable because if you're reaching out to the same person again in 6 months and they've already said that they're not interested, that is not a good look for the company. So all of that data is pretty valuable. That's your engagement data, CRM data, all of those kind of things. The other thing is your search preferences. So the way our agents work is that they don't just like do a one-off job and then forget about it. They actually retain important information about what kind of role, what kind of profiles your company actually likes, and what kind of people perform better in your process. So the next time you're using Juicebox for another role, you have all of this context built in from like previous roles you've hired for. That is incredibly valuable in running a more efficient process because otherwise you have to start from scratch and you have to calibrate things again. So I think both of those elements make the product pretty sticky.
One actually follow up on that as well. You mentioned efficiency of process. What are some of the other ways that customers define success using Juicebox? Is it truly just speed? Is it breadth of candidates? Now I know more. Yeah, just curious how they quantify or judge.
There's one piece which is the speed. How much, or rather, I think the better proxy is maybe time. Like how much time are we saving you? How much less time do recruiters have to spend on the sourcing and engagement, and more time that they can spend on closing candidates, on managing the process, those kind of things. So that's one dimension. The other dimension I like to think about is how important finding the right person for your company is. Because you're not just running a more efficient process, you're actually finding better people because you can spend time on it. So many of these recruiting processes, the way they go is they'll like start off and then around like a 1 month mark when you're starting to get a little bit like concerned about like not having enough pipeline, the bar drops and then you're not hiring as the kind of people you initially wanted to hire. That is what Juicebox saves you from doing. So instead of like you having to actually run a very long and extensive process and finding people that are not even a fit, Juicebox ensures that you have a good top of funnel of people that are actually a good fit. We make sure that you're engaging the right people. And that's one of the most high value things that a company can do is find the right people who can actually like steer things in the right direction.
And it sounds like you've been moving rapidly deeper into the AI space, deeper into agents, and really automating the end-to-end recruiting process. But I'm wondering if we're sitting here in 5 years, what does the future of recruiting look like?
Recruiting at the end of the day is, if you look at it if you try to draw a box around it, it is a zero-sum game because there's a finite list of candidates and those candidates are going to end up at some company and it's your job to win it, which is why it's incredibly competitive. The way we see recruiting evolve is that in, let's say, 5 years from now, Juicebox agents are going to be running the sourcing and the engagement piece. Juicebox is going to identify the right people for you, engage them, get them into your process, and talent teams will spend more and more time on providing better candidate experience and closing the right candidates. So spending more time with the candidates, making sure that you're running an efficient process that is more pleasant both for the candidates as well as the company, and make sure that you're closing the right people and spending more time with them.
How long does a typical search take when you're running it for? Maybe you can give an example role and just what it looks like.
It's extremely variable from company to company. It depends really on like the kind of talent brand you have. But I would say like if let's say you're looking for like senior software engineers in the Bay Area, that would, and you're a Series B company or a Series C company, that would be a search that takes at least like 1 month to 2 months on the minimum. Like that's like an efficient process that you ran from like finding people to actually hiring them. And often it can take a lot more. It really just depends on how nuanced is that role, how hard it is to hire for that role, and how much do people actually want to work at the company.
Yeah, you actually bring up a very good point. We're in San Francisco right now hosting this interview, and we all know and have heard about the talent wars that are happening in the AI space in particular. Given you're sitting at the intersection of AI and talent, curious, what are you seeing from a talent ecosystem in the Bay Area? How is Juicebox? I know you're powering over 3,000 customers, but you also are probably seeing how quickly talent is moving. Yeah, I would love to hear your perspective on it.
It is a very interesting dichotomy, I feel like right now, where on the one hand, if you look at some of the more macro picture reports, the amount of jobs is actually going down a little bit. So it's not on the up. At the same time, the top talent that people are looking for that process is so much more competitive now. It's kind of unfortunate, but like a lot of the early career recruiting has gone down a little bit, where it's harder to find jobs, and it feels like that to a lot of early career candidates. Whereas at the same time, if you're a mid-level engineer or you're a senior level engineer in the Bay Area, people like are absolutely like harping on those right now. Like, they are
The
so
inverse
competitive.
effect to the market.
Exactly, yeah. And it's very interesting because I mean all the tech stocks are still kind of ripping, and there's like so much capital, and it's really a good period for AI right now, which is why there's so much investments. That is why I think like there's this like interesting dichotomy where like if you're a mid-level or a senior engineer or anyone in the Bay Area who has some level of experience in the industry, then people are really going after those candidates.
So we read an interesting stat, or maybe you told us, I forgot. But you reached your first million in ARR without hiring anyone. Do you think that is what the future looks like for AI companies being built?
I think we took it to the extreme a little bit, and in our case, it was also an interesting piece because we had this like long pivoting journey, and it's harder to move things around with more people. Like it's harder to steer a ship that's bigger. So I think it gave us a lot of flexibility in the early days to make sure we really double down and like really figure out exactly how we want to like shape things out and build our vision before like starting to scale the team. So in our case, yes, it was like a lot more extreme than it usually is. But I do think companies will be leaner and move faster. Like we see that within our engineering team. To date, our engineering team is now what, like 6 or 7 people, which is like very little for the revenue stage and the number of customers we have. And the reason we are able to work efficiently is because all of these LLM tools, like they make you so much more efficient. You have to spend less time on writing code that LLMs are good at writing, and you can spend more time actually architecting systems and making sure you're making the right engineering decisions. So I think teams will continue to be more lean, and we'll probably see more billion-dollar companies being built with like less people.
I think we're both observing that for sure from the investor lens of just like meeting companies that are at much later maturation from an AR perspective, but much leaner teams. But you bring us to a pretty interesting point around fundraising and financing a business that's growing as quickly as yours. We know that you recently raised a Series A. Maybe tell us a little bit about the raise and maybe what were some of the things you were focused on from a milestone perspective to say, hey, we're ready to take on more financing and go even faster.
We announced Series A, which was 30 million, along with our, which was 10 million in the same announcement. We raised a lot later than most companies raise a Series A. The reason we did that is because honestly, we didn't need the capital. We're not burning any money. We're growing quickly, and we didn't feel like we even needed to raise. But we also ended up realizing that right now is a very good opportunity because talent is so competitive. Everyone wants to hire good people to run an efficient process. LLMs can really help with all of that process. So it was a very good time for us to like scale the company quickly, make sure we are able to grow even faster, which is why we ended up deciding to raise the capital. Even though we didn't need it at the time, we felt like this can help us invest even further in growth and do things faster.
I'm sure, given that you did choose to raise later, that there was a lot of interest in the round, and I'm sure a lot of preemptive interest as well. When you were thinking about who you wanted to work with, and presumably this might have been the first board seat, what type of investor or board member were you looking for? What traits really mattered?
There's two things we talk about internally a lot in terms of culture. One is moving fast, because it's a competitive space. You need to do things quickly and iterate quickly. And the second thing we talk about a lot is intellectual honesty, which is this idea of like truth seeking, that we don't just want to believe things because they sound comfortable. We want to question it, we want to get to the bottom of it, and we only want to believe things if they're deeply rooted in truth. And that's what we are trying to look for in a partner as well. It's like, who can we find who actually shares our beliefs, who actually shares our values, who tries to question things from the ground up, question things from first principles, think about things more logically, follow a good line of reasoning, and honestly like give it to us straight. Like someone who will be honest and upfront about things and not try to like bullshit you into believing like different things that are not really true.
Well, given you brought on more capital with the Series A, it sounds like you guys have not slowed down at all. If anything, you're just accelerating more. How are you thinking about further product expansion? What does the roadmap look like for you guys?
We're working very actively on a memory layer right now, which is what I talked about earlier as well, is like how can we retain more and more context from our agents. We see companies, like a lot of our contracts, the way they look like is they will buy 20 seats and then they will buy 20 agents, one for every single one of their recruiters. So the recruiters will use the platform, but alongside they will spin up all of these agents that will do a lot of the sourcing for them. We're generating a lot of data every single day because you're spinning up all of these agents that are like going out there finding candidates for you, and they have all of this information about your preferences, about the kind of people you like, about the kind of people that are making it through your process who actually end up getting hired, and who's even interested in the first place. And all of this data is incredibly valuable to shape your talent organization over the next few years even, because all of this data helps you build on top of whatever experiences your team has already had. So one thing we're working on a lot is building a more long-term memory layer and making it even more transparent to the user about what the AI is learning from you, how is it maintaining a memory set in the background, and how it is starting to actually use that in more future roles. Another thing we are very excited about is more deeper integrations with ATSs. So some of these enterprises use platforms like Workday and Oracle, and they have data from the last few decades, like not even years. It's literally like 30 to 40 like years of applicant data. And all of this data is also incredibly valuable in shaping your recruiting strategy because you know who's applied, you know who went through the process, you know who's a successful employee at your company today. So we're trying to capture more and more insights from that data and make sure we're able to more deeply integrate with these systems. And our vision is to go from a job description to a first call booked with a qualified candidate without any human intervention. And I think we're working towards that.
When do you think that will be actionable?
I think it's a lot closer than most people think. In a few
2025.
months, we'll be seeing that. We already see that with some roles that a lot of our customers hire for. And I think we'll start seeing that across more and more roles very soon.
Awesome. I guess my last question on the memory layer, what does it look like? Are you leveraging the off-the-shelf open source software? Are you leveraging OpenAI, or how are you embedding it?
We use a lot of like foundational models directly from the labs and use a lot of APIs. We do have some fine-tuned models that we self-host as well. So we use some of the open source models from DeepSeek, but the most amount of success we've actually had is with the foundational models from the labs. So we mostly rely on that kind of infrastructure.
Well, do you want to hop into a quick fire round?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. What is one word to describe the future of recruiting?
Automated.
What is a piece of advice for first-time founders?
Stay persistent. You can pivot your ideas. That's like totally fair. And you just have to keep going. Get ready for like a world of pain and be okay with it.
What's the hardest decision you've had to make so far as a first-time founder?
Changing directions was extremely like, because the what you're really saying when you're pivoting is that everything I did over the last few months is going out of the window. It's completely useless and I'm starting from scratch. And saying that is extremely scary, but it's also very, very necessary because you don't want to go down if that does not scale. So
And what can you not automate today that you can in the future?
pushback. Whenever you actually reach out to a candidate, sometimes they're interested, sometimes they're not interested, and sometimes they are on the fence. And when they're on the fence, they need to be sold to, and you need to answer questions about whatever their concerns are. Handling that objection and getting them onto a first call is something I strongly feel like we can automate soon. And then there's a whole scheduling piece after that of like getting them on the calendar, booking a call. So all of that I think we can also do.
I have one more bonus question. Given that I think most of our listeners know that it's a very active space right now, there's a ton of competitors popping up. And if I'm coming to you as an enterprise company, why should I choose to work with Juicebox versus the next AI HR tool?
The first thing is social proof, that you should look at our list of customers and you should see that we have 3,000 customers and we have some of the best companies in the world using Juicebox. And the reason they made that decision is because they did exactly what you're planning to do, which is try 3 or 4 different tools and end up realizing that they're getting the most gain from Juicebox and end up going with us. So the social proof is the first thing. And the second piece is that we approach things from a very, very first principles perspective. Like we're not trying to replace your ATS. We're not trying to like shift around your existing workflows. We're trying to deeply integrate with it and make sure that we can save you the most amount of time and make sure that your organization is competitive, and not just because we want to sell you another piece of software that's like N+1, like just slightly more efficient, but because we actually want to save the grunt work that people don't enjoy right now.
Awesome. That's all.
Amazing. Thanks so much. This was great.
Of course. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
having me.
Amazing.